A very good morning to all our dear listeners and viewers. Welcome to ACFIM Talks, yet another edition. Today, the 3rd of December 2021. The year is taking a corner. We are almost at the tail end. And allow me once again to invite you to be part of this conversation by, first of all, subscribing to our YouTube channel. It should be flashed on the screen shortly. Hit the like button, subscribe to get the updates, and also be able to follow the discussions, and also be part of the conversation by also following us on our Facebook page, ACFIM, and also on our Twitter handle at ACFIM UG. My name is Felix Kafuma, who is going to be moderating today's show. And with me, I have two distinguished guests, which I'll be introducing in a short while. But we are discussing a very interesting topic concerning of Chinese loans and national assets, Africa's sweet sour experience. And this discussion topic has been informed by the developments that have graced our screens, that have been in the media for the last, I think, since the end of last week, when one of the local dailies did break a story concerning the state in which our national airport, Entebbe, was at risk of being taken by the Chinese if we fail to honor the loan received. For some of you who are just hearing this for the first time, I encourage you to check that out in a number of media press reports that have been coming out. And we know the money being talked about is about 713 UGX billion shillings, which is an equivalent of 200 million US dollars, that was loaned to Uganda for purposes of expanding the airport. I think that money was supposed to facilitate the expansion of the passenger terminal, erect a new cargo facility, refurbish the airport, 2 runways, and we the loan. I think we took that loan, according to the Attorney General, on the 31st of March 2015, and supposed to run for 6 years, meaning on 1st April. 6 years from then, I think 1st April 2023. More there or so, we are supposed to have cleared this loan, and the reports do indicate that the clauses in there don't seem to favor our position if we don't honor the payments, and we risk losing or joining other countries that have lost their national assets. We know this has happened to Zambia. We also hear a rumor that Kenya, I think they lost their port. We'll be verifying that when my guests join on set. And but also, since the story broke, we've had a number of responses from government. I think first it was the spokesperson for Civil Aviation Authority of Uganda, coming out to deny that everything is in order. And then recently we saw the Attorney General, Chiriowa, also appearing before COSASE, that is the Committee on Commission and Statutory Authorities and State Enterprises, and was also saying everything is in order, we shouldn't get worried. But also we had a bit of a contradicting statement from the Minister of Finance, Matia Kasai, just saying that, yes, if we don't honor our part of the bargain in terms of paying back the loan, we risk losing the national airport. That now sets us going in terms of discussing. We need to unpack this. And with me, I have Patrick Katabazi, who is the Executive Director for Center for Budget and Tax Policy. He's an economist and a lawyer. Patrick, you are most welcome to the show.
The pleasure is mine, and thanks, Felix and ACFIM, for inviting me.
Great. And then also with me, I have a lady, Penninah Mbabazi. Penninah is an expert on public finance and trade. Done a lot of work around policy analysis in that area and research. Is currently working with SEATITNI Uganda as the program officer under date and aid thematic area. Penninah, you're most welcome. All right. And let me get this conversation off the ground. Let me start with you, Patrick, on this question. Why is China looks like when you talk about Africa as a continent, most African states are running to China to access loans. What is the secret with China loans and African states or African regimes?
Yes, Felix, the loan business, especially for African countries, has been having a lot of challenges. And most of the loans that come to African countries generally are modeled around targets and strategic intervention areas of most of the lenders. And here we are talking about the big lenders like the World Bank. We are talking about other like International Development Bank and others. So these go into countries and identify strategic areas of investment. They do rigorous analysis and make money available to these countries. And some of these loans that are given to the lenders that I've talked about are highly concessional because first and foremost, they have a development-oriented perspective. But we also know that at a country level, there are other needs that some people may not consider to be of high priority, but then they need financing, and that is how China has come in. Because of the appetite to, for example, boost physical infrastructure, which may not be covered under the other options, or whose process of getting the money is very long and very rigorous. That has attracted the attention of African countries to China because China has been doling out money, making money available, indicating that they can spend or provide money for anything. But Felix, as you know, some people think that something that is easy is something that they should go for. We are now realizing that what was seemingly easy and sweet is actually not the case, because in that excitement of saying that we can get any money that we want for any project that we want, it is coming clear that as a matter of fact, that the end game may be bad, or at least for now, very unpredictable.
Wow, interesting. Penninah, unmute yourself because I want to bring you in here to pick your thoughts. Katabazi raises a very interesting point here, and I'm picking it from there because help someone understand why is it that when it comes to China, for example, loans from China, they are mainly more predisposed towards financing infrastructure like football stadiums, standard gauge railway. In fact, one of my colleagues was asking me, what is it with China and financing stadiums and financing their loans, financing stadiums, football stadiums, financing standard gauge railway, and not necessarily financing social sectors like health and education. Why does China take that path?
Thank you, Felix. From 2013, China actually enrolled into their Belt and Road Initiative, which was mainly targeting developing countries, 70 developing countries, where they could actually actually give out loans to countries that would be able to boost their bits on infrastructure and other projects. And this is where it's coming from. China actually, in that time, had a lot of money that they had loaned to so many countries, like like Zambia, that actually also fell into a debt trap, but also others like Kenya, Uganda, within the region. And currently, it's also because one of their foreign policy initiatives was to make sure that they could be able to come in as bilateral creditors in Africa, which now they are actually the leading creditors right now in Africa, where they've been able to give out a lot of loans, more especially in targeting, without even in line with how big of an interest rate they have taken on for government to be able to pay back, but more because they could give huge amounts of money to invest into these infrastructure. Because during the same time in 2013, we also had on our side as Uganda, that is the time when we now started focusing on a lot on infrastructure projects, the Karuma Dam, Isimba, also the Kampala Express Highway, now also the Entebbe Airport. This is where all those different kinds of projects are going to be financed from. So it's mainly because some of this has been a route that has been changed by China to come into Africa as one of the largest creditors, to be able to help countries, or to be at least on their side. It's saying that they are helping countries to be able to achieve their infrastructure and other projects that they have. And
I seem to be losing you, Penninah. I think your network, yet you are making a very interesting point. I'm losing Penninah a bit there, and she was
help
trying
World
to
Bank and
very
same. Can you?
now I can hear you, but your
Sorry
network is a bit like
about
that.
that.
Proceed. Okay. I'm having a bad connection. I think Penninah has a bad connection. Let me first come back to Patrick here on now talking about, when you talk about experiences of China loans so far with African countries. There have been in, some interesting cases similar to what government is treating as, for now that we are safe, allaying fears. But we've seen a couple of countries that are indebted to China losing their national assets. We've seen Zambia. Probably help me confirm also if Kenya is almost losing its, I think, Mombasa port for another loan from China. And if that is to go by, where is the problem? Why are we finding ourselves trapped in this arrangement of China being indebted to China, but at the risk of losing our national assets? Patrick, unmute.
China's financing model is different from the other development financing models that we have been exposed to, like I said in the beginning. And if you have been listening to the narrative, you will find that financings come through the designated Exim Bank.
Yes.
And the agreements that are made between Uganda and these banks is of a commercial nature. So I want to relate it to a situation here that we have here in Uganda, where you have an option to go to the bank and borrow money, or go to a money lender. You know that sometimes in Uganda circumstances, when you go to a money lender, you're made to sign that you have sold even a piece of land or a car, even when you know that in reality you haven't. You simply, somebody just want to use those extreme methods in order to make sure that they don't lose a penny. I want to apply the same to China. In this particular case, China has been requiring countries to accept very tough conditions. And those include, number one, taking over assets in case of default, or taking over the assets for the purposes of running it in order to get money, to get revenues, and then use the same revenues to recover their money. And that is why you see that lately they picked an interest in airports, because these airports make a lot of money for even sake. They have also invested heavily in road tolled infrastructure, because I mean you simply need the road toll and somebody to man it and start collecting money with the expectation that money collected, if government has failed to pay the loan, with the money collected can be then used to pay back. So the reason why there is anxiety is that this lending dispensation is rather unique. It is not what we have been used to previously. Because you know, since independence, most African states, including Uganda, have been borrowing. But they have never been thrown into this kind of anxiety and panic. Because largely here, the terms are very different and are largely commercial. Very commercial in nature, without any development, possibly without any development context. And again, what we have also seen progressively and across the board is that we either did not have, and I think we did, in Uganda's case, we did not have very strong and robust departments within our government system that, number one, are capable for very elaborate project appraisals, but also, more importantly, not having officers, not having technical capacity to engage in this kind of negotiation. Because I want to give you an example that we have been negotiating loans with World Bank, which are highly concession loans. And if you wanted to cut, copy, paste, and put it that, then that experience does not work. Here you're dealing with a money lender, more or less to speak, who is highly commercialized, who has interests of a purely commercial in nature. And therefore, then you would need an expert in negotiating, in commercial negotiation, so that you get the best deal possible. And what is happening right now is that people who have contracted these loans are now realizing that they should have negotiated better. And in my view, that is the basis for the kind of the cat getting out of the bag that we have seen. Because if there was not any attempt to renegotiate, ask for renegotiate certain clauses, maybe the public wouldn't have known. But the public got to know in the case of Entebbe, because there were attempts trying to renegotiate certain clauses. So if you want to renegotiate after the contract has already been signed, it means that the negotiation process and the contracting process has a problem. So back to your question, we are seeing this crisis happening in Uganda and in many other countries because prior to this, we do not have inbuilt mechanisms within our government system to do proper project appraisal. Because if you do proper project appraisal, it means that you are even sure that this entity that you're borrowing money for is not only going to sustain itself, but is going to make more money that can be used to pay the debt in record time as it is possibly visited under the agreement. And of course, the other one being that lack of adequate capacity to negotiate properly.
Wow, interesting. You can be part of this conversation on our social media platforms, our Facebook page. We are live. ACFIM, we are also live. You can also, we are live on our Twitter, ACFIM Uganda, also on YouTube, ACFIM Uganda. Be part of the conversation. You send in your questions. Penninah, I lost you there a bit. You had a bad connection. You were making a point, which I will allow you to make, but also, looking at what Patrick has just shared in terms of where the gaps are. In the case of Uganda, where does the backstop? Who should be held responsible for the predicament we are in? Is it the Minister of Finance? Is it Parliament? Because Parliament approves. Is it the head of state as the overall accounting person? Is it the Attorney General? Where does the backstop? Let's assume worst case scenario, we lose this airport. Worst case scenario, if I'm an angry Ugandan, who should I really hold responsible?
Thank you, Felix. Yes, as I was earlier saying, mainly as to why China is actually now focused on assisting, the word would be not but giving assistance when it comes to financing countries, developing countries and their huge infrastructure projects, is basically because at this time they're really holding a bigger leverage when it comes to how much they're able to fund countries, and also looking at the clauses that could be in line with the agreements when it comes to signing. Some of them, of course, have not been reasonable or even fair to so many developing countries. But again, still we continue to borrow from them, and also seeing that some of the way they have decided to look at it is that already if we take on such a huge amount of money from a creditor like China, that can be able to give us maybe a longer grace period, but regarding to how much return is taken in as investment, that is already a big challenge on some of the projects that they have already financed here in Uganda. So it's already some of the strategies they have as as their foreign policy to make sure that they do channel that money to African countries, which puts them in a good position when it comes to being one of the biggest and largest creditors in Africa. Yeah. Currently, for especially in regard to this area, what has happened right now in for the airport, I believe, of course, we have so many actors that could have done better in scrutinizing this loan and being able to have taken into consideration some of the clauses that were put in. Already, Ministry of Finance, also as one of them, I believe, could have been able to have proper technocrats who could have actually negotiated for the right clauses or for the right, at least for the benefit of Ugandans being able to actually enjoy some of the returns that will come from investing in such a huge project. I believe they have the capacity to be able to ensure that some of these clauses could have been properly uh, looked at and thoroughly, not for it to come out in 2021 when this agreement was signed in 2015. And basing on how far, of course, so many things have changed. The members of parliament that were there currently are not there. Some of them have already moved out, some are still in there from the 10th parliament. And they signed a lot of number of loans, not even this one alone, but there were so many loans in their time that they had to take on and approve. And I feel their scrutiny also as Parliament was necessary, their oversight in ensuring that some of these loans had to have a lot of information backed on top of them as a feasible studies, the clauses that were going to benefit Ugandans and not only just government taking on such a huge amount of money. Also, in terms of the services that it was going to bring, debt repayment that we're going to have to uh, be able to pay back on the loan should have been able to at least be scrutinized in order to ensure that so many of these services that will come out from this airport running, the revenues that would be collected would actually be then channeled to proper service delivery rather than having to be channeled into paying back some of the already obligations that are entitled in that agreement. So I believe Ministry of Finance, Parliament had a really great impact in this loan, as well as for the ministers also. Honorable Matia Kasaida, he could have been able to still have time to actually wait for proper scrutiny of this loan. So I believe it's a lot of people that should have been brought on that could have actually great influence in how the loan would have been managed. But more especially because we now see countries like Zambia have fallen fault in not being able to now come back to renegotiate some of these clauses. Because for them as China, they believe that it was due diligence that they did. And whether these loans were not actually scrutinized thoroughly at the time, or clauses that were not scrutinized thoroughly at that time, they do not believe they're at fault, which means us as a country would actually stand highly at fault, and it would not be them to blame. That's how they look at it. And you can't really look at it as them being the problem, because for them they came at a time, offered the loan to the government, and it for them as a government, they had actually already internalized how much more they could benefit compared to Uganda, which is now going to have to see some of those challenges as we go on.
Wow, that's Penninah. Trying to clearly uh, hold people responsible. Who is responsible for what went wrong? And But in there, you didn't mention the Attorney General. Probably I'll come back to that, but let me throw in here Patrick. Now, there's been a lot of debate around the issue of could we be losing our cherished national airport, but in terms of its implications to the country, paint for me a picture. If I'm a wananchi, an ordinary person, I sell in the market, what is the implication if, God forbid, we lost such a national asset to a data like China? Why and why should I get concerned? Why should I get worried? Why should I get angry with the developments?
If Uganda lost an asset like the airport to China, or even the Entebbe Expressway, for example, it has very many implications on the life of an ordinary citizen. Number one, you know that the airports, for example, like in Uganda's case, we have only one airport. So an airport, in my view, is a sign of sovereignty. So if your only international airport, or perhaps even national airport, is being run by foreigners per se, it's, in my view, a slap in the face of a patriotic Ugandan, because this is a very important strategic asset for security and national pride. So for me, start with at the emotional level, that would be a very serious loss. Economically, the one who controls an airport determines the charges that are levied on the cargo, handling services, on immigration services, in my view, on even transit charges as well. So in my, and of course, you know that Uganda has many organizations that are within Entebbe Airport there. You have Uganda Revenue Authority there. You have the Ministry of Internal Affairs there. You have the Ministry of Works there. You have security, Ministry of Security as well, and Defense, all around the airport. So if these are controlled by an entity that is other than government of Uganda, it therefore means that government will have to pay money in order to maintain their presence. But this is money that otherwise would have been used to provide services to Muntu Awansi. So it is too bad. It is too. It is double. It is a double-edged sword in this particular case. There is where government overtaxes you in order to meet the obligations, especially so if the business if the business for which money was borrowed is not viable, and therefore government has to come in very strongly and pay the money to rescue itself from the bondage that is apparent. But also when ultimately the airport has been taken over, when they levy charges on the government of Uganda's bodies that are operating within the airport, it means that the government of Uganda has to budget more. So maybe tax you more. Or even the money that, even if they maintain the taxes, even the money that ordinarily would have been used to provide goods and services to a common person won't be there. But also at personal level, there are many people who use the airport services, as an example. And you cannot imagine how it would be like using the airport for your travel or for any other reason, and is not managed by your countrymen and in your own country. So that feeling alone, in my view, is equally very, very important, and we cannot attach any monetary value to it.
Now you know why we are having this discussion and why also we are investing our emotions in it. But Penninah, coming off what Patrick has just said, is there a way Africa as a continent, because if you shared earlier how China is the biggest loan provider to Africa, I think you talked about targeting about, you said 70 states. That's the, and but with all the technicalities around China loans, is there a way we can insulate ourselves from what I'm going to call the Chinanization of Africa through their aggressive loan requirements and loans to Africa?
Thank you, Felix. Just to add on what you had also earlier asked, whether why I didn't mention say the Attorney General, I actually thought of the Office of the Auditor General, because they do produce reports annually, and one of their actual input into how at least one of the areas for value for money on some of the projects that government was now looking at financing. They had a report in 2016 that they released, and they mentioned some of the worries that they had, because at that time also already government was still focused on infrastructure and improving infrastructure, and less on service delivery, social service sectors. But their main issue was mainly on low absorption of these loans, on how long it was going to take for Uganda to be able to actually properly absorb these loans, since some of them had been, of course, falling short of the time they were disbursed, and how long it took for the project to actually start and implement it. So also one of them were commitment fees that were already being attracted to, just like the Entebbe airport. Already they mentioned that in a gap, because we are the commitment that we have actually put uh, in the loan already has been actually adding up continuously. This is already going to be a big challenge on our side, because those commitment fees keep on. Sorry, I think I lost you. The commitment fees keep on adding. While we have had this time of lockdown, where we had already, they say that the money that was actually given to Uganda at this time, the project was not able to continue and was halted. Already, that those are some of the commitment fees that will have to pay in regard to when it comes to our debt repayment and the interest that we have to add onto when we're paying as a country. So regarding to how the loan itself, how we can be able to maybe um, as a country when it comes to this loan, I think the biggest challenge right now is that we now have to find a way for government to, of course, cut a lot back on its expenditure, curb its expenditure, because some of that money that is actually now going to a lot of different projects that they could be mainly prioritizing, instead of prioritizing now, looking at how best we can now look at that money being channeled into the right sectors to kind of bring back a lot of return. We have the express highway that they want to currently put a toll fee on, which should be actually already be running. We would be able to now get the same revenue off that to be able to channel into, knowing that we have a safeguard in case anything happens, in case China is not able to renegotiate, like they have already stated, some of those clauses. Already we have to keep in mind we need to have a backup and be able to know that while it is not confirmed that the airport is taken from sources that I have talked to, it is that it's mainly going to put us in a big challenge to be able to know that we have to have a target to meet when it comes to paying back this loan. But also, we need to be able to look at strengthening, especially capacity building, when it comes to strengthening parliamentarians, especially in this new current 11th parliament. How best can we utilize their role to be able to know that once some of these new loans are coming in currently, they should be able to actually criticize and scrutinize the actual documents that are attached to them when it comes to those feasible studies that are done. When it comes to beneficiaries, who are the beneficiaries to this project? We want to have Ugandans own and be proud of some of the projects that are actually currently now on, and know that they actually have a full benefit to them, and not them having to calculate how much is going to be taxed when it comes to for them to be able to contribute to some of these projects in practice refinancing how best the country should move, because unfortunately the government was not able to be able to have proper scrutiny in those clauses that actually are going to affect us. So I believe that some of them, such as that, as well as broadening our tax base, trying to see how best we can utilize the resources that we have. Already we are challenged with our domestic mobilization, where we fail to still find a way to not put a lot of pressure on the poor, or the people who are failing to actually, who are the ones who are carrying the economy right now. The private sector is already being kicked out from being part to being in to being able to borrow money from banks, just because a lot of it is actually instead being taken to government, to which a lot is we're seeing so much is happening, making it hard for the private sector to even be involved when it comes to their part they could actually be able to contribute to the economy.
Yeah, sure. Indeed, when you have government borrowing from the private sector, from the banks, you basically crowding out the private sector, and I agree with you on that one. Patrick, there's an issue here which I want you to help us with. First of all, the relationship between China loans and political finance, but also what is it with China loans to African regimes and their state of governance? Because those two seem to be related. Patrick, are you there?
I beg your pardon. I didn't hear the question.
Yeah. I'm trying to understand the relationship between China loans and political finance, but also have a very good understanding between the same China loans to African regimes and their state of governance.
Yes. So one of the reasons why China loans are very attractive is that, like I said, they are really largely commercial, and they do not take into account quite a number of conditionalities like we normally see for most of the loans from the West. And in fact, for example, that the United States of America does not give loans, and many other countries in the West do not give loans. In fact, what they do best is to give development assistance in terms of grants. But most of the grants and support that comes from these countries really do not support physical infrastructure, which is a key need that African democracies have wanted, because usually our leaders want something they can feel, they can touch and feel, and a road, an airport, a very beautiful airport, a very beautiful bridge comes in handy into that perspective. And even when people get these low cost or concessional loans from World Bank and many other affiliated entities, there are a lot of conditions. Sometimes you remember in one of the roads, a case of sexual harassment was reported, and all of a sudden the financing stopped for the road because it was reported that a number of girls in that area were getting pregnant by the road contractors. That certainly wouldn't stop if it was a Chinese loan, because then for them, they are very relaxed. They do not have an attachment to democracy. In my view, they do not have any attachment to human rights. So they simply look at what they can get out. And that has made it very endearing to many African leaders. But as we are going to see, as we possibly feel right now, there is a huge cost that is coming at the tail end, because here they are very easy to contract. There are not many conditions that are attached. They can lend money for you to do anything that cannot be possibly accommodated by the current possibly loan regime in the low-cost areas. But then you have to pay higher costs, both in terms of money, but also in terms of the of what you lose. I mean, if, for example, a lender does not pay particular attention to the socio-economic and political realities in a country, then it means that perhaps we as citizens are not also benefiting possibly so much. So, but for a leader, really, you want anybody who doesn't want to ask questions. And there has been a whole debate about whether really a lender or development partner should be interested in how the country is governed or run. And those people who say people should not interfere with the sovereignty and the internal democracy dynamics, those who support that notion are really very warm to the Chinese model, because the Chinese model is really very blind to other realities other than their own interest and also the commercial element that is embedded in some of their loans that they give to us.
Interesting. And let me throw in here, Penninah. I know I'm going to introduce you to a subject. I don't know whether you're very familiar with it, but either way, you should be able to make a connection concerning political financing, the way we finance our politics, for example, like elections, and our being more in there towards China loans. Is there a relationship that you can be able to pull out and paint a picture for anybody who's listening?
Thank you, Felix. When it comes to political financing, what I can probably link to it is that, of course, when countries like, let's say, the president is able to actually achieve one of or some of his maybe obligations, should I say, some of his main goals that he could put onto maybe campaigning for another term, or even for looking for more votes. Of course, this would really look good. A lot of projects, of course, have been already running, and yes, some of them have come out to be able to be to a big benefit to Ugandans, but still the amount to how fast we want to borrow and have less of it to look at how exactly are the people who are intended to benefit, are they actually benefiting from some of these projects? Remember the Loboa incident, the Loboa hospital. That was a good initiative to tackle health and how best we could actually ensure that people were able to get the right health care for the right reason. Yes, but we already got to see that already it was a loan that had a lot of gaps, a lot of challenges. Up to now, we cannot say that so many people have been able to not be crowded in that hospital to actually retain or to actually get the services they needed. And while all these projects look very smart and very enticing as a country, any leader would actually want to capitalize on being able to make sure that some of them actually come through and can be able to gain and be able to have them gain a lot of popularity when it comes to how best they have done, when it comes to how best the citizens have been able to see what exactly it is that their money has been used for, or what the loans they have borrowed has been used for. And our infrastructure projects is one of them. So compared to some of the sectors that would have been also properly at least utilized, seen to have an impact when it comes to people, we are instead now looking at a bigger diversion when it comes to having to put more emphasis in infrastructure projects, yet a lot of the return investment is not actually coming back to meet a lot of citizens' needs and what they would want to be able to also look at and say, I voted for my leader and I was able to get what I could as a citizen for the taxes that I pay, for the necessary need that the country needs to be able to be sustainable when it comes to its debt, but also just to acquire services. And that, unfortunately, there is an imbalance when it comes to how the political financing really has been able to kind of ensure that some of that is actually their output, their outcome to all of it. It would be good if all of this financing was coming to meet a proper intended objective, which is to really tackle a lot of the challenges when it comes to road usage, how best we can go from one area to another, whatever services that can come along from having these infrastructure projects also along such a time, especially in this area where so many countries have good airports. are actually channeling a lot of their revenue from getting so much out of these or out of their airports into social sectors. But we're not seeing that. Yeah, we're not seeing that.
Wow. And still on that, so what lessons do we then carry from this? Seems to be a growing list of African countries that either losing their national assets to China or are at risk of losing their national assets to China. What lessons are there for Ugandans? I'm still with you, Penninah, on that one.
The lessons I could mention, one is to be able to be accountable and transparent. It's not a government role to take on some of these loans, of course, on behalf of the citizens, but to also be transparent on how some of these loans are actually being handled. People want to be able to see that they're involved, and also government is actually being transparent. Even while you see some countries can argue that USA is one of the highest, also is just as well indebted, even when it's a huge, powerful country. It itself also has loans that they do borrow and they are still indebted. But you do not see some issues like citizens failing to be able to appreciate the services that come through with those loans. So we want to be able to see transparency and accountability from government to be able to ensure that even Parliament itself can be able to scrutinize some of these loans to a great magnitude, but also the time that is taken to have these loans actually scrutinized. It should not be put on pressure of Parliament or on the government to make sure that they sign. They should be able to actually consult and have times for where even civil society, different stakeholders, stakeholders can be able to be involved in the process and actually make sure that it does intend to meet the beneficiaries and their needs. But also, what we are now seeing, what we need more is to know that we have a very crucial negotiation team that can be able to do the right thing for Ugandans, not necessarily just for the country, not for the government only, but for the citizens. We do not usually take on such loans just to be squeezed by having high taxes to pay, but we would want to know that while government is able to go and borrow, and they actually do have the right technical people to scrutinize some of these clauses when it comes to some of these loans, it would give us some peace of mind. Also, another thing is to take note of at least some of the reports that have come out from the Office of the Auditor General. There are a lot of different concerns that are put when it comes to projects and how best they're actually being managed. We need to put that into consideration and learn from them, as well as adhere to our public debt management frameworks, all those frameworks that are put in place to curb our borrowing. When we look at how far we are as a country passing the threshold, the 50% threshold, which we say currently Uganda is still its debt is still sustainable. Right now, you would not want to have such an argument because it kind of does not give us comfort knowing that we are still going to look at, in case the airport goes, we may not be able to have to look at it on a part where government has done due diligence to make sure that we do not have to incur more taxes as citizens, but that our revenue from the airport will be able to actually meet some of those demands, but also channel it down to the social sectors. So yeah, that's just some of the few that I could mention.
Thank you. Talking about our debt financing, Patrick, I'm bringing you in here. I have some statistics which I need to first verify, but I'll, either way, for purposes of this debate, I'll throw them out there. I got some interesting statistics that our debt now stands at $19.5 billion, meaning that our debt to GDP ratio is 65%. Now that's a bit way above the recommended threshold of 50%. What does this mean in view of what's happening when we talk about China loans? What does this mean really? Should I get concerned? Should any Ugandan get concerned? What are the implications?
Ugandan should certainly get concerned about the rising debt. What I know for certain is that in real terms, our debt to GDP is almost becoming unsustainable. And you need to look at the numbers and appreciate the fact that our revenue growth is not at the same level in a way. I want to throw in numbers for this financial alone. So you find, for example, that our budget is about for 5 trillion, thereabouts. And then you find that our tax, our domestic tax revenue, or our domestic revenue potential is about maybe 22 trillion. So it therefore means that our budget, if we are going to use our domestic revenue as a yardstick, we as Ugandans, we cannot finance our budget even by half. So that therefore means that most of the money that we use to finance our budget is borrowed, either domestically or externally. Now, we have already discussed the implications of domestic borrowing, as it has the potential to erode our private sector in terms of crowding out. Because, I mean, banks, as you have possibly seen, including one of the reports that came out recently, that the Uganda Development Bank, instead of making money available to our local business persons, they are also fixing it. They have also invested in treasury bills and bonds. So because most of the banks find it much easier and risk-free to invest in that particular area, but then also that keeps interest rates very, very high, and the cost of doing business ultimately becoming very high. So that's not good for our private sector development. So, but it also means that our revenue, our domestic revenue growth in the way it is, we are going to reach a level, if we haven't, where all the revenue that we shall get will be for payments. Right now we are paying interest substantially. But we are going to reach a level where we are borrowing to pay interest and the principal. So you have a loan with Felix, so you borrow from Penny to pay Felix, or Penny, Rose, and others to pay Felix. And that will diminish the resources that are available to finance public goods and services, because the budget that you have is twisted towards our lenders, not rather towards our citizens, in terms of provision of health, provision of education services, supporting agriculture, and indeed, by the way, maintenance of the physical infrastructure that we are borrowing heavily for. You recall that a recent report that was published that indicates that whereas government of Uganda has invested strongly in the health, rather in physical infrastructure, that as a matter of fact, not having a budget for maintenance of this physical infrastructure is actually eroding the gains that have already been registered, because ultimately these heavy physical infrastructure projects require some little bit of maintenance and repairs once in a while, so that we maximize benefits that arise out of that investment. So on a whole, our rising debt to GDP might also reach a level where actually it becomes highly unsustainable. That means that we can still no longer borrow money if our credit rating, of course, goes beyond the one that we currently have. The one we currently have is still a fair, looking at most of the ratings that we have. I think our rating is about B, around there, which is still favorable for people to lend us money. But if this appetite goes up or keeps up the way it is at the same trajectory, even if it keeps at the same trajectory, sooner than later, it will be highly unsustainable. Our credit rating will plummet, and as a result, we are going to find ourselves in a very, very tricky spot where we cannot even borrow to pay our debts because we are highly unsustainable. But perhaps the only solace that we have as Ugandans in this whole debate is the unspotted revenues that are likely to come from oil. But ladies and gentlemen, if you have been following the debate in Parliament about the amendment of the Public Finance Management Act that are aimed at allowing, the National Oil Company from collecting money from the sale of oil and utilizing it without reporting to Parliament, that also shows you that we should not become very optimistic about that. Yes. And also, if you're also following the ECO bill, the East African Pipeline law that will govern how this whole thing shall go and how some aspects of revenues will be managed, it also raises red flags. So if oil cannot come to our rescue and we keep at this debt trajectory, it therefore means that we as Ugandans are headed for tougher times.
Wow. I have only 5 minutes to end this show, and one question for you, Patrick, in a minute, and also a question to Penninah in a minute. And my question to Patrick first, let me finish with you. I'll come back to you later on for closing remarks, is about the issue of China. Could we argue that it's taking advantage of economically a weak continent? You see, Africa has all sorts of challenges, financial challenges. We are grappling with security issues. Is China's presupposed good Samaritan behavior of giving us loans a cover up to take advantage of the weak state we are in as a continent?
Yes, and I think my strong view is that certainly China, in its practice, has a predatory element, and that's why it really all of us roundly call them debt trap loans, while others have been calling them development assistance loans. And there's a reason why all of us in unison are singing that song, debt trap loans as opposed to development assistance. I saw the information from the embassy here slamming critics that why are they being treated unfairly. Yes, they are not being treated unfairly. We are simply saying, have you had a situation before where a national asset is under threat because a government contracted a loan? It's never been the case in Uganda and elsewhere. But because it is coming with them, with their own facilities, with their terms, even when we have agreed with them. Yes, because sometimes some people agree to certain conditions because they're in a very vulnerable position. And I do not want to believe that even when we develop in excessive capacity of our technical staff to negotiate better, I don't want to believe that we have developed that independence, in my view, that economic independence, in my view, to negotiate very well alone from a spot of power like China. Sure. So we are vulnerable, and to be honest with you, it is possible and quite obvious looking at these agreements that we have been engaged in, is that there are some clauses that will reflect that somebody has taken advantage of our desire, of our need, of our desperation in some instances.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Penninah, you have the last word on this one. It's a quick question around Africa's agenda of 2063 to ensure that the continent will have pulled all its people into the middle income status. Is this a possible dream given the way we are relating with China in terms of loans? Your last word on that.
Thank you, Felix. Africa's 2063 dream, I would, right now in this current situation, it feels it's a bit, it's something that we can continue to hope for, but depending on how we go about it, if we are still borrowing at the rate that we are borrowing, and if we're actually still in that desperate seat that Patrick has mentioned, where we are vulnerable as a country and we still do not have a way of actually being able to be properly having the strong commitment to ensuring that we can actually develop vis-a-vis being tied on loans and countries' creditors' agendas, how they tend to come and try to sweep us off our feet. We need to be able to be committed to resource mobilization as countries, not to depend on only loans, because already we know that there is so much commitment that is already placed there. The agenda itself looks quite, it would definitely be good if we could actually meet it. If we could actually say, as Africa, we're targeting to be a middle income, all of us have, as countries, be middle income countries. But why would we still be having to still face a lot of challenges when it comes to just trying to improve on some of the social sectors that we have to ensure that people, the citizens, are able to benefit from so many of these loans, even while projects are currently running out. Just for Uganda, we know that so many times we have failed to actually be able to benefit from them, and we're putting ourselves not only as a country in a fix, but also as citizens, because so much of us will have to pay when it comes to having to actually make sure that our taxes are there, our revenue is at shortfall, but we should be able to know that we are going to actually be squeezed to know that we have to pay to contribute to the dream that we want to achieve. And that middle income status will come really at a big struggle. It may not come smoothly, but it will really be highly, because of there will be a lot of inequality that will be created, not only for me and you, but also for people who are down at the grassroots. We're not going to see so many people come out of poverty to ensure that they can be able to know they have uh, already been able to benefit from some of these infrastructure projects, but also from these sectors, health, education. There will be still that huge gap that is going to still arise. We believe that also currently we know that so many of us have failed to be able to appreciate or have full ownership as to some of these projects that are going on, because why we have not been able to see that as a citizen you're able to benefit highly just by even being able to pay your taxes. You know, you have to look at the next financial year and more years to come to how best we can actually see the economy can thrive. And also our numbers already, like Patrick mentioned, are not very enticing. So we need to see that we curb a lot of government expenditure to be able to meet the intended results that we need to be able to achieve a middle income status. Yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you. That was Penninah, who is the current program officer under Date and Aid thematic area at SEATITNI, Uganda. And I also had with me Patrick Katabazi, who is the executive director for Center for Budget and Tax Policy. We are over the top of the hour, and my name is Felix Kafuma. Allow me to sign out. Thank you all for being part of this discussion. Till next time, bye bye. Take care. God bless.